We spend so much time looking up. We aim our telescopes at distant galaxies, searching for signals from civilizations light years away, hoping to find some trace of intelligence that isn't our own. But tonight, we're going to do something different. We're turning away from the sky. We're looking down into the cold, crushing darkness of the Pacific Ocean, where something extraordinary has been waiting for us all along. The Giant Pacific Octopus. If you asked a science fiction writer to design an alien life form from scratch, they'd probably come up with something like this: a creature that runs on 3 hearts, pumping blood that isn't red but a deep metallic blue. A being with no skeleton whatsoever, just pure, flowing muscle that can squeeze through any gap wider than its beak. An animal that tastes the world through its skin, sees polarized light through rectangular pupils, and thinks with not 1 brain, but 9. What follows is the story of this animal, how it lives, how it hunts, how it thinks. We'll watch it vanish into the reef in the blink of an eye, changing both color and texture faster than any chameleon. We'll explore the strange distributed architecture of its nervous system, where each arm operates with a mind of its own. And we'll witness one of nature's most heartbreaking acts of devotion, a mother who starves herself for months to ensure her children survive, then dies the moment they hatch. This isn't just biology. This is a window into a completely different kind of consciousness, one that evolved in parallel to our own, separated by 500 million years, yet arrived at something we can only call intelligence. Meeting an octopus is the closest most of us will ever come to encountering an alien without leaving Earth. When we think about intelligent life on Earth, we almost always picture vertebrates, dolphins clicking in the waves, elephants mourning their dead, chimpanzees fashioning tools from sticks. We assume that intelligence is something that belongs to animals with backbones, something that runs in the mammalian family. The octopus shatters that assumption completely. It's a mollusk. Its closest relatives are clams, slugs, and snails, creatures we typically associate with slowness, simplicity, and not much going on upstairs. The octopus lineage split from ours over 500 million years ago, long before dinosaurs, long before flowers, long before anything resembling a modern mammal walked the Earth. What this means is profound. The octopus didn't inherit its intelligence from some common smart ancestor we both share. It invented intelligence independently. It's a completely separate experiment in building a mind. To understand how this happened, we need to go back to the Cambrian period, when the ancestor of the octopus was a small creature living inside a protective shell, not unlike a nautilus or a snail. It moved slowly, relying on its armor for safety. But somewhere along the way, one lineage made a radical evolutionary gamble. They abandoned the shell. They traded protection for mobility, armor for speed. Without that heavy casing, they could swim freely, squeeze into cracks, and hunt actively. But they also became incredibly vulnerable. Suddenly, they were soft, exposed targets in a world full of predators. The solution was to get smart, really smart. Camouflage, problem solving, rapid learning, these became the new survival tools. The octopus is the descendant of the creatures that decided wits were a better defense than a wall, and over hundreds of millions of years, that bet paid off spectacularly. Here's the puzzle that keeps biologists up at night. In the animal kingdom, high intelligence is expensive. Building a big brain burns enormous amounts of energy. Evolution typically only makes that investment if the animal lives long enough to use it, to accumulate knowledge, to learn from experience, to benefit from all that cognitive hardware. Elephants live 70 years. Great apes can live 50 or 60. Humans often make it past 80. We have decades to learn, to remember, to apply our intelligence to the problems of survival. The giant Pacific octopus lives 3 to 5 years, that's it. In the span of a human childhood, an octopus is born, grows from a speck the size of a grain of rice to a 100-pound predator with arms spanning 20 feet, learns to solve complex mechanical puzzles, recognizes individual human faces, and dies. There's no time for extended childhood learning. There are no parents to teach it anything. An octopus is orphaned from the moment it hatches. There's no culture, no accumulated wisdom passed down through generations. Every single thing an octopus learns, how to catch a crab, how to hide from a seal, how to open a jar, it figures out alone, from scratch, in its brief window of existence. It's a flash of brilliance that burns bright and fades fast. And it raises an uncomfortable question. What could they become if they only had more time? The giant Pacific octopus, Enteroctopus dofleini, is the largest of all octopus species, and everything about its anatomy seems designed to challenge our assumptions about how a body should work. Start with the circulatory system. A single heart isn't enough to push blood through the resistance of gills and out to the tips of 8 long muscular arms. So the octopus has 3. The central heart, called the systemic heart, pumps blood to the body and the brain, keeping everything running. But blood pressure drops significantly after passing through the dense tissue of the gills to pick up oxygen. To compensate, evolution added 2 auxiliary pumps, the branchial hearts. These sit at the base of each gill, acting like turbochargers, boosting the tired blood through the oxygen exchange and back to the main heart. It's a complex 3-part rhythm that keeps the animal alive in the freezing depths. There's a catch though, a flaw in the engineering. When an octopus swims using jet propulsion, forcing water through its siphon to blast itself backward, the physical exertion actually causes the main heart to stop beating temporarily. Swimming literally stops its heart. This is why octopuses prefer to crawl along the bottom rather than swim through open water. Crawling is gentler on the system. Jet propulsion is for emergencies. And then there's the blood itself. We take it for granted that blood is red. Ours is red because it uses hemoglobin, an iron-based protein that binds with oxygen, and iron turns red when it oxidizes, just like rust. But in the cold, low-oxygen environment of the deep ocean, iron isn't the most efficient tool for the job. The octopus uses copper instead. Their blood is rich in a protein called hemocyanin. When this copper-based molecule binds with oxygen, it doesn't turn red, it turns a deep metallic blue. If you saw an octopus bleeding, it would look like ink or antifreeze. This blue blood is crucial for survival in the frigid waters of the North Pacific because hemocyanin transports oxygen more efficiently at low temperatures than hemoglobin ever could. The trade-off is that it makes the blood thicker, more viscous, harder to pump. That's another reason for those 3 hearts. It takes serious pressure to move this heavy blue life force through the body. Reach out and touch your own arm. You can feel the hard resistance of bone beneath the muscle and skin. Your skeleton defines your shape, determines how you can move, sets the limits of what positions your body can take. An octopus has none of this. Apart from its beak, a sharp, parrot-like structure made of chitin hidden at the center of its arms, there isn't a single hard part in its entire body. Instead, it operates on what biologists call a hydrostatic skeleton, supported entirely by the pressure of its own internal fluids, much like a tongue or an elephant's trunk. This grants the octopus a kind of superpower, infinite compressibility. A giant Pacific octopus weighing 100 pounds, with arms spanning nearly 20 feet, can pour its entire body through an opening the size of a lemon. If the beak fits, the octopus fits. They can slide through cracks in crab traps to steal the bait, flatten themselves like paper to slip under rocks, flow through drainage pipes. They're not limited by the geometry of joints and hinges. They're limited only by that one small piece of hard tissue. That beak, by the way, is a marvel of engineering in its own right. The tip is incredibly hard, harder than steel by some measures, designed to punch through the shells of crabs and clams. But as you move back along the beak toward the soft tissue of the mouth, the material gradually becomes more flexible. It's a gradient, hard at the tip and soft at the base, so it doesn't cut the octopus's own flesh. Inside the beak sits another tool, the radula, a ribbon-like tongue covered in tiny sharp teeth used to drill into shells and scrape out meat. The beak is the octopus's only hard relic, the only thing that remains after death, a black, curved artifact left behind in the sand. To understand how an octopus thinks, you have to abandon almost everything you know about how brains work. In a human, or a dog, or a fish, or pretty much any vertebrate, the brain sits in the head, protected by the skull. It's a centralized command center that processes information and sends specific instructions down the spinal cord to the rest of the body. It's a hierarchy, with the brain firmly in charge. The octopus works completely differently. It has a central brain, yes, a donut-shaped structure wrapped around its esophagus, but this central unit contains only about a third of the animal's 500 million neurons. The rest, nearly 2/3 of the entire nervous system, is distributed directly into the arms. Each arm has its own dense cluster of neurons, its own ganglion, essentially its own mini-brain. This means the central brain doesn't need to micromanage the movement of every sucker. It can send a general intention, something like, explore that crevice, and the arm figures out the complex geometry of the task on its own. The arm decides how to bend, which suckers to engage, how much force to apply. It's not waiting for detailed instructions from headquarters. It's improvising, making local decisions based on what it's sensing. The implications of this are strange and profound. In laboratory experiments, scientists have observed that a severed octopus arm, completely detached from the body, will continue to exhibit complex, seemingly intelligent behavior for hours. If you touch it, it recoils. If it encounters a piece of food, the suckers grasp it and the arm attempts to move the food toward where the mouth used to be. The arm knows what to do without being connected to the head. What does this mean for the octopus's sense of self? We humans feel like a pilot sitting inside a body, a single unified consciousness directing the machine from behind the eyes. But an octopus might experience something more like a committee, a fluid consensus of semi-independent agents working together, yet capable of acting alone. Its self might be distributed, spread out across 8 arms, experiencing the world from 9 different perspectives simultaneously. We simply don't have a framework for understanding what that kind of consciousness feels like from the inside. This distributed architecture produces a problem-solving ability that has become legendary among aquarists and marine biologists. The giant Pacific octopus isn't just reacting to its environment, it's actively manipulating it, testing boundaries, figuring things out. They can unscrew jars from the inside to get at a crab. They navigate complex 3-dimensional mazes and remember the solution days later. In aquariums, they're notorious escape artists. There are documented cases of octopuses climbing out of their tanks at night, slithering across the dry floor to a neighboring tank, eating the fish inside, and returning to their own tank before the keepers arrive in the morning, leaving nothing but a trail of water as evidence. They've been observed dismantling filtration valves, plugging drains to flood laboratories, short-circuiting lights by squirting jets of water at the bulbs. At one facility, staff couldn't figure out why certain fish kept disappearing overnight until they set up a hidden camera and caught their octopus on a midnight hunting expedition. These aren't instinctive behaviors programmed by evolution. This is curiosity. This is a mind that pokes at the walls of its reality, to see what gives way. Perhaps the most unsettling realization for anyone who works with octopuses is the moment they realize the animal is studying them back. Octopuses aren't passive subjects, they're observers. They form opinions. Experiments at the Seattle Aquarium and other facilities have demonstrated that giant Pacific octopuses can distinguish between different individual humans, even when those humans are wearing identical uniforms. They'll approach a keeper who feeds them gently, their skin flushing a calm, rusty red. But they'll hide from, or actively squirt water at, a keeper who has annoyed them in the past. They hold grudges. They form preferences. Behind those strange rectangular pupils, there's a distinct personality building a social map of the giants who watch through the glass. In less than 200 milliseconds, literally faster than a human blink, an octopus can vanish. This isn't metaphor or exaggeration. One moment you're looking at a large, rust-red animal pulsing against white sand. A split second later, you're looking at a rough grey rock covered in algae. The animal hasn't moved, it's just gone. What makes this possible isn't simple camouflage. It's something far more sophisticated, a multi-layered system of skin cells that can manipulate color, reflectivity, and even three-dimensional texture in real time. The octopus reads its environment through its eyes and possibly through light-sensitive proteins in its skin, then transforms itself to match not just the color of the background, but its physical roughness, its pattern, its luminosity. Divers have looked directly at a 50-pound octopus and seen nothing but reef. The skin of an octopus is essentially a biological display screen with 3 distinct layers, each serving a different function. The top layer contains millions of tiny organs called chromatophores. Think of them as biological pixels. Each chromatophore is a small sac filled with pigment, red, yellow, brown, or black, surrounded by a ring of microscopic muscles connected directly to the nervous system. When the muscles relax, the sac contracts to an invisible dot. When they tense, the sac stretches wide, revealing the color. By orchestrating millions of these pixels simultaneously, the octopus can paint complex, high-definition patterns across its body faster than any chameleon. Below the chromatophores sits a second layer of specialized cells called iridophores. These aren't pigment sacs. They're stacks of microscopic protein plates that act like tiny prisms, reflecting the ambient light and creating the metallic iridescent sheens that help the octopus match pearlescent shells or the silvery flash of passing fish. By adjusting the angle of these plates, the octopus can manipulate the wavelength of light itself, shifting its appearance as the angle of the sun changes overhead. The deepest layer contains leucophores, cells that act like a perfect white canvas or a mirror. They reflect all available light back through the upper layers, increasing color vibrancy when needed, or matching the ambient brightness of whatever surface the octopus sits on. Bright for white sand, dark for shadow. Together, these 3 systems give the octopus complete control over how light interacts with its body. Color alone isn't enough. If your skin matches the rock perfectly, but your surface is smooth while the rock is rough, you're still visible. So the octopus changes shape. Using a complex network of muscles beneath the skin, it can raise specialized bumps and spikes called papillae. In an instant, it transforms from balloon smooth to the jagged texture of coral, or raises ridges that mimic flowing seaweed, or sprouts horns that look like barnacles. The octopus doesn't just look like a rock, it feels like a rock. It dissolves its own 3-dimensional form into the landscape, becoming completely undetectable until it chooses to move. There's a hunting strategy that showcases all of these abilities working together. It's sometimes called the moving rock maneuver. The octopus shapes itself into a boulder, turning grey and rough, matching the surrounding seafloor perfectly. Then it begins to move, but not like an animal. It drifts at the exact speed of the current, stopping when the water slows, moving when it pushes. To a crab or a fish watching nearby, it looks like just another stone tumbling in the tide. It's only when the rock is inches away that the arms suddenly explode outward, engulfing the prey in a net of suckers. This isn't just camouflage, it's theatre. The octopus is acting out a role, committing to a performance so completely that its prey never sees the predator until it's already caught. Here's something that shouldn't make sense. Most research suggests octopuses are colorblind. They have only one type of photoreceptor, which means they should see the world in grayscale, and yet they match colors perfectly. They flawlessly replicate the orange of a sponge, the green of kelp, the mottled brown of a rock. How? The leading theory involves something called chromatic aberration. The unique rectangular shape of the octopus's pupil might allow it to split light into its component wavelengths, like a prism. By selectively focusing different colors on the retina, bringing red into sharp focus, then blue, then green, the octopus may be able to calculate color through physics rather than perceiving it through dedicated color receptors. It's a workaround, a clever hack that achieves the same result through a completely different mechanism. And it works so well that the octopus out-camouflages animals that can actually see in color. Imagine if your fingertips could taste. Imagine that every time you touched a doorknob, picked up a pen or brushed against a wall, your brain flooded with the flavor of that object. For an octopus, this isn't imagination, it's ordinary life. The underside of each arm is lined with over 250 muscular suckers, more than 2,000 across all 8 arms. We know these suckers can grip with enormous strength. A single arm can lift 30 pounds, but their primary function isn't holding on, it's sensing. The rim of every sucker is densely packed with chemoreceptors, the same biological sensors found on the human tongue. This means the octopus has what scientists call a tactile gustatory system. It tastes by touching. As it moves across the murky ocean floor, it's constantly licking the landscape with its hands. It can detect the chemical signature of a clam buried deep in the sand just by brushing the surface. It can taste the difference between a rock and a sleeping crab without seeing either. The ocean becomes an endless map of flavors, every texture carrying information, allowing the octopus to navigate through darkness by taste alone. The eye of an octopus is a striking example of convergent evolution, 2 completely unrelated species arriving at the same solution independently. It looks remarkably like a human eye, with a lens, cornea, and retina. Our last common ancestor was probably a blind flatworm, yet nature invented the camera eye twice, from scratch, because if you want to see the world clearly underwater, this is apparently the design you need. But stare into that eye and you'll notice something strange. The pupil isn't round, it's a horizontal rectangle, a dark bar floating in a golden iris. And here's what's remarkable. No matter how the octopus twists, turns, or hangs upside down, that rectangular pupil stays perfectly level with the horizon. Inside its head is a specialized organ called a statocyst, a biological gyroscope that constantly sends signals to the eye muscles, rotating the eyeball to compensate for body position. The octopus always sees the world right side up. There's one more detail worth noting. Unlike the human eye, where the optic nerve passes through the retina and creates a blind spot, the octopus eye is wired differently. There's no blind spot. In this one respect at least, evolution did a better job the second time around. Most of the time, an octopus moves at a leisurely pace, flowing over rocks and through crevices, tasting the substrate as it goes. But when danger appears, A seal diving, a shark turning, the octopus can transform in an instant from a liquid crawler into a biological rocket. The mechanism is pure hydraulic engineering. On the side of the octopus's head is a muscular tube called a siphon. To move, the animal relaxes its mantle, that large bag-like structure behind the eyes, allowing water to flood into the internal cavity and wash over the gills. Then, in a violent synchronized contraction, it seals the intake valves and squeezes the mantle muscles. The water blasts out through the narrow nozzle of the siphon. By Newton's third law, this creates an equal and opposite reaction. The octopus rockets backward, tentacles trailing in a streamlined cone. It's the same physics that powers jet aircraft, evolved millions of years ago in the ancient seas. In short bursts, an octopus can reach speeds of up to 25 miles per hour, an extraordinary velocity for a boneless creature pushing through heavy water. If speed isn't enough, the octopus has a second line of defense: chemical warfare. Near the liver sits a specialized organ called the ink sac. When stress spikes, the octopus squeezes this sac, mixing dark pigment with thick mucus, and blasts the result directly into the face of its attacker. But octopus ink isn't just a smokescreen. The animal can control its viscosity, sometimes releasing a diffuse cloud to cover a retreat, other times releasing a thick mucus-bound blob that holds its shape in the water. This blob, called a pseudomorph, looks roughly the size and shape of an octopus. The predator attacks the decoy while the real octopus turns pale and jets away in the opposite direction. The ink also contains high concentrations of tyrosinase, a compound that dulls smell and taste. It temporarily numbs the predator's sensory organs. A shark left swimming in that black cloud is suddenly blind and unable to smell blood while its prey vanishes into the reef. We often picture octopuses as wrestlers, overpowering prey with the strength of their suckers, but they're also assassins. All octopuses produce venom, a cocktail of neurotoxins and enzymes manufactured in the posterior salivary glands. When a giant Pacific octopus catches a crab, the struggle is brief. Using its sharp beak, it drills a tiny, precise hole through the crab's shell and injects toxic saliva. The venom paralyzes the prey instantly, stopping the heart and nervous system. But it does more. The enzymes begin liquefying the muscle tissue inside the shell, breaking down the connective attachments. The octopus doesn't need to fight the crab out of its armor. It waits for chemistry to do the work, then slurps out the meat like drinking through a straw. It seems like a mismatch, a soft, boneless invertebrate against a shark. But in the cold depths of the North Pacific, the tables sometimes turn. The giant Pacific octopus is strong enough to capture and kill a spiny dogfish shark. The strategy is suffocation. The octopus doesn't try to bite immediately. It uses its arms to entangle the shark, wrapping suckers over the gills to stop it from breathing, or holding it upside down to induce tonic immobility, a trance-like state that sharks enter when inverted. Once the shark is immobilized, the beak delivers the fatal bite. It's a stark reminder that in the ocean, a skeleton isn't always an advantage. A creature of pure muscle and high intelligence can outmaneuver one built on instinct and teeth. We're surface dwellers. We live at one atmosphere of pressure. If we dive deep, the weight of the water crushes the air spaces in our lungs and sinuses. We're fragile bubbles, but the octopus belongs to the abyss because it has no air-filled cavities, no lungs, no swim bladder, and no rigid bones to snap. The octopus is virtually incompressible. Water pressure flows through it rather than against it. A giant Pacific octopus can glide comfortably from the surface down to depths exceeding 5,000 feet, where the pressure would crush a submarine hull. It feels no weight. It's a creature of liquid living in a world of liquid, immune to the grip of the deep. The waters of the North Pacific hover around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to slow most metabolisms to a crawl. But the octopus thrives here. Its copper-based blood releases oxygen more efficiently when chilled. In fact, the giant Pacific octopus is so adapted to cold water that it can't survive in warm environments. Raise the temperature and its blood chemistry fails. It overheats. This cold adaptation fuels remarkable growth. In just 3 to 5 years, the animal goes from a speck the size of a grain of rice to a 100-pound giant, powered by the cold energy of the deep. It's an engine optimized for chill, moving through dark, icy currents with a metabolic efficiency that seems almost engineered. Despite its size and strength, the octopus is profoundly shy. It spends most of its life inside a den, a small cave, a crack in the rock, a hollow space under a boulder. It craves the sensation of being enclosed, squeezing into spaces that seem impossibly small, filling every corner with its fluid body until it can feel rock pressing against it on all sides. That touch provides security. Outside many octopus dens, you'll find a telltale sign, a pile of empty shells, crab, clam, abalone. This is the midden, the trash heap of a recluse, what some have playfully called an octopus's garden. It's the only mark they leave on the world, a quiet collection of remnants at the doorstep. The octopus's life is a study in solitude. They don't form schools or pods or packs. They never know their parents. They never meet their siblings. If two octopuses encounter each other, they'll likely fight or ignore one another unless it's mating season. They possess remarkable intelligence without culture, without the ability to learn by watching others, without any way to pass knowledge down through generations. Every problem they solve alone. They're hermits of the sea, accompanied only by the conversation of their own 9 brains. When a dog sleeps, its legs might twitch. When a human sleeps, our eyes move. But when an octopus sleeps, its skin tells a story. In recent years, marine biologists have captured footage that suggests something stunning. Octopuses dream, and they dream vividly. A sleeping octopus is usually pale and smooth, conserving energy. But during certain phases of sleep, activity explodes across its skin. It flashes a deep, angry red. A band of white pulses across the mantle. The texture spikes into coral roughness, then smooths out again. Colors chase each other across the body in chaotic patterns. Because the octopus has no skeleton to hold it still, and its brain is distributed throughout its skin, it can't paralyze its body during sleep the way we do. The subconscious leaks out. Scientists believe we're watching neural playback, the memory of the day's events replaying across the skin like a silent movie. That flash of red might be the memory of attacking a crab. That texture change might be hiding from a seal. The octopus dreams, and its dreams are visible. Just like humans, octopuses appear to have a structured sleep cycle. They alternate between quiet sleep, still and pale, and active sleep, which resembles our REM phase. During active sleep, which occurs every 30 to 40 minutes, the animal comes alive. Suckers twitch, eyes move rapidly, chromatophores fire in bursts. This suggests that complex sleep, and perhaps dreaming itself, isn't unique to vertebrates. It may be a fundamental property of sophisticated minds, something that emerges independently whenever a nervous system grows complex enough to need it. Deep in the cold ocean, in the safety of a rocky den, an invertebrate intelligence is processing its reality, organizing memories, perhaps wandering through a mental landscape as vivid as the physical one. For a long time, tool use was considered the dividing line between humans and everything else. Then we admitted chimpanzees, then crows. Now we're adding the octopus to the list, shattering the assumption that you need a backbone to be an engineer. In the sandy shallows of Indonesia, veined octopuses have been filmed performing a remarkable sequence of behaviors. They find discarded coconut shell halves on the seafloor. They don't use them immediately. Instead, they dig them up, stack them like nesting bowls, and carry them awkwardly across the ocean floor, stilt walking on stiff arms. The shells are heavy and cumbersome. Carrying them is costly, but they're carrying them for later. When a predator appears, the octopus quickly drops the shells and reassembles them into a sphere, hiding inside. This demonstrates foresight, the ability to imagine a future threat and prepare for it in the present. The octopus is using an object not for what it is right now, but for what it could become. That's a mental leap that defines high intelligence. But the real mark of a complex mind isn't just practical problem solving, it's play. Play is biologically expensive. It burns energy without providing food or safety. Evolution typically doesn't invest in play unless there's surplus processing power, a mind with capacity to spare. In aquariums, well-fed octopuses often engage in behaviors that serve no survival purpose. They've been seen pushing pill bottles into water jets repeatedly, watching them bounce back, catching them, and pushing them again. They're playing catch with the current. They seem to enjoy novelty for its own sake. Some juggle objects between their arms. This suggests their minds have room to spare. They're not just biological robots programmed to eat and breed. They're curious entities capable of boredom and amusement. In the quiet of the tank, the alien is having fun. Humans have been watching octopuses for as long as we've been watching the sea, and what we've seen has shaped our myths, our fears, our sense of what lurks beneath the waves. The octopus has been many things to us: a monster, a deity, a puzzle. Before we knew what it was, we imagined what it might be. For centuries, the map of the world ended at the water's edge. Beyond that lay the unknown, and the human mind filled that void with monsters. The most enduring of these is the kraken, a creature from Norse folklore, described in 13th century sagas as something so vast it could be mistaken for an island. Sailors whispered of a beast that would rise from the abyss, wrapping immense rubbery arms around the masts of ships to drag them into the crushing dark. The legend eventually crystallized into the form of a gigantic cephalopod, the embodiment of the sailor's deepest fear, the idea that the ocean wasn't empty but occupied by a malevolent, grasping intelligence. The kraken represents the moment when the abyss reaches up to touch the surface. Today, we suspect these legends were inspired by sightings of giant squids dying on the surface, rare encounters with animals from the deep that seemed, in the dim light of a storm-tossed deck, like something from another world entirely, but the cultural impact remains. The octopus became the symbol of the deep, the tangled mystery, lurking just beneath the waves. On the other side of the world, in the warm turquoise waters of the Pacific, the octopus was viewed through a very different lens. In ancient Hawaii, it wasn't a monster, it was a god. The octopus was considered a physical manifestation of Kanaloa, one of the four great Hawaiian deities, ruler of the ocean, guide of the dead, master of magic. In the Kumulipo, the Hawaiian creation chant, the octopus is described as the lone survivor from a previous alien world, the only creature that persists from one era of the universe into the next. Ancient navigators respected the animal for its ability to move through the complex three-dimensional landscape of the reef. They didn't fear it. They saw it as a symbol of fluidity, adaptability, survival, a sacred navigator swimming through the stars of the sea. In Japan, the relationship with the octopus is intimate, pragmatic, and ancient. Japanese fishermen understood the psychology of the animal thousands of years before Western scientists studied it. They recognized that the octopus wasn't driven by aggression but by anxiety. it craved a home. They developed a fishing method called takotsubo, the octopus pot. They'd lower unbaited clay vessels onto the seabed, tied to long ropes, relying entirely on the octopus's instinct to hide. The animals would find these smooth, dark, secure sanctuaries and climb inside, claiming them as safe dens. When fishermen pulled the pots up, the octopuses would often refuse to leave, holding on tight. It's a trap based not on hooks or violence, but on a deep understanding of the creature's need for security, a trap made of comfort. In the folklore of the Ainu people of northern Japan, there lives a spirit in Funka Bay known as the Akorokamui, a titanic octopus, red as blood, so large that when it extends its arms, the sea itself turns crimson with its reflection. It's described as a benevolent but terrifying spirit, capable of healing and granting knowledge, but demanding absolute respect. The Ainu believed the Akorokamui could detach its own limbs to regenerate, a mythological echo of the real biological ability of octopuses to regrow lost arms. It stands as a guardian of the bay, a giant red watcher lurking beneath the waves, blurring the line between the physical world and something older. It reminds the people that the ocean provides, but it's also a domain that belongs to the giants. The story of the octopus is, in the end, a tragedy of timing. Here is an animal with intelligence that rivals primates, that solves problems and uses tools and recognizes faces, and evolution has given it 3 to 5 years. The octopus is semiparous. It reproduces only once, and then it dies. This short lifespan prevents them from passing anything to the next generation. A mother octopus never meets her children as adults. A baby octopus never learns from its elders. Each generation starts from zero, reinventing the world alone. It's a brilliant mind, trapped in a fleeting existence, a spark that extinguishes just as it begins to truly understand the universe. As the octopus approaches the end of its life, it enters a phase called senescence, a rapid, genetically programmed breakdown of the body. It's not a slow decline, it's a cliff. Once they've mated, both male and female begin to deteriorate. The male often dies within weeks, his body losing the will to hunt, eventually consumed by scavengers. He returns his biomass to the ocean ecosystem, feeding the very creatures he once hunted. But for the female, the end is different. It's prolonged. It's a slow, deliberate act of sacrifice. Toward the end of her life, the female finds a safe hidden den, a deep crack in the rock, a cave protected from currents. There, she lays her eggs, not dozens, not hundreds, up to 50,000 tiny rice-sized eggs. She weaves them into long, delicate braids that look like clusters of white grapes, hanging them from the ceiling of her cave like a living curtain. And then her vigil begins. For the next 6 months to a year, depending on water temperature, she will not leave this cave. She will not hunt. She will not eat. She walls herself in with her children. She spends every waking moment tending to the eggs. The ocean is full of bacteria, algae, and silt that could smother them. She strokes the braids gently with her arm tips, cleaning them with the tenderness of a gardener, tending rare orchids. She uses her siphon to blow gentle currents of fresh, oxygenated water across the eggs to keep them breathing. She defends the entrance against crabs, fish, and starfish that would devour her offspring. As weeks turn into months, her body consumes itself. She loses weight. Her skin pales and loses its ability to change color. Her strength fades. She's metabolizing her own muscles and organs to keep the water flowing. She's converting her own flesh into their survival. Finally, the day comes. The eggs hatch. Thousands of tiny, transparent paralarvae burst from their shells and drift out of the den, rising toward the surface to join the plankton. The mother watches them go. Her job is done. She's now a ghost of her former self, pale, empty, exhausted. With her last reserve of energy, she often uses her siphon to gently blow the babies out of the cave, giving them one final push into the world. She dies shortly after the last egg hatches. She never sees them grow up. Her death is the price of their life. It is perhaps the most absolute act of parenthood in the animal kingdom, a total gift of the self to the future. The giant Pacific octopus is the largest of its kind, but it's far from alone. The world's oceans are home to hundreds of octopus species, each adapted to its own niche, each carrying its own strange gifts. In the shallow, muddy volcanic sands of Indonesia lives a smaller cousin that has turned camouflage into something like theatre. The mimic octopus doesn't just blend into the background, it impersonates other animals. When threatened by a damselfish, it pulls 6 arms behind it and flattens the other 2 in opposite directions, undulating them to look exactly like a venomous sea snake. When a shark approaches, it spreads its arms wide and floats, mimicking the toxic spines of a lionfish. It can flatten itself to look like a flounder gliding along the bottom. It carries a mental library of dangerous animals, choosing the perfect costume for each specific predator. It survives by becoming anyone but itself. Size can be deceptive. In the tide pools of Australia and the Pacific lives an octopus the size of a golf ball, yellowish-brown and harmless looking. But when agitated, brilliant electric blue rings flash across its body. This is the blue-ringed octopus, one of the deadliest animals on Earth. It carries tetrodotoxin, a neurotoxin 1,000 times more potent than cyanide, produced by bacteria in its salivary glands. There's no anti-venom. It doesn't need camouflage to survive. It walks with the confidence of something that carries the power of life and death in a package small enough to fit in your hand. Miles below the surface, where the pressure crushes submarines and light never reaches, lives something that looks nothing like a deep-sea monster. The Dumbo octopus is named for the 2 large ear-like fins on top of its head that flap slowly, making it look like a Disney elephant flying through the water. It hovers just above the seafloor, drifting in utter darkness. It rarely uses jet propulsion that burns too much energy. Instead, it glides on those gentle fins. It has abandoned the ink sac entirely. Ink is useless where there's no light to block. It's a soft, pale ghost of the deep, adapted to thrive in one of the harshest environments on the planet. Its scientific name is Vampiroteuthis infernalis, the vampire squid from hell. The name is a lie. It's not a squid, and it's certainly not a vampire. It's an ancient relic, a living fossil that bridges the evolutionary gap between octopuses and squids. It lives in the oxygen minimum zone, a layer of the ocean where oxygen levels are so low that almost nothing else can survive. It has a dark red body and enormous eyes that glow blue, but it doesn't drink blood. It eats marine snow, the drifting detritus of dead plankton and organic matter sinking from above. When threatened, it doesn't squirt ink. It pulls its webbed arms up over its head like a cloak, turning itself inside out to reveal harmless fleshy spines. It's a gothic creature of the shadows, asking only to be left alone in the dark. The octopus challenges everything we thought we knew about consciousness. We assumed intelligence required a backbone, a cortex, a social structure. We assumed minds evolved to help us communicate, to navigate tribes and hierarchies. The octopus has none of that. It's solitary. It has no language, no culture, no one to talk to. Its intelligence evolved for something else entirely, for navigation and predation in a complex, shifting, three-dimensional world. What this proves is that consciousness isn't a single invention. The universe has generated mind in at least 2 completely different ways. One path is terrestrial, social and rigid. That's us. The other is aquatic, solitary and fluid. That's them. We are 2 different answers to the same question. How do you navigate a complex world? The octopus is the ocean's way of thinking. It's water that has organized itself into a mind, a creature of pure fluid dynamics that has learned to solve puzzles, to plan for the future, to remember faces, to play. When we look into those strange rectangular eyes, we're looking at something genuinely alien, not from another planet, but from another branch of the tree of life that grew parallel to our own. Somewhere right now, in the cold, dark waters of the North Pacific, a giant Pacific octopus is returning to its den. It slides its fluid body into a narrow crevice, filling the space completely, pulling a few stones and shells across the entrance. Inside, it's dark, tight, and safe. 3 hearts beat in a slow rhythm. 9 brains quiet down. The vigilance of the day gives way to the stillness of stone. The giant is resting, suspended in the cold, holding onto the rock with the gentle grip of 1,000 sleeping suckers. And in its dreams, if octopuses dream, perhaps it's reliving the hunt, the chase, the colors flickering across its skin like memories made visible. We came looking for aliens. We found one. It was here all along.
you. you.